This is OG with original-gamer.com, and I am with today
David Malone.
Now, David, you're with the Houston Symphony. How long have you been with the Symphony, and what instrument do you play?
33 and a half years, and I play double bass.
Now, we just saw Distant Worlds, Final Fantasy music, and it's a great experience. Now, this is not your first time doing Final Fantasy music. You did the previous Distant Worlds last year here in Houston. With the video game music, how does that compare to your sort of normal classical music that you play on a regular basis?
Well, it is different. I mean, it's not composed by the classical composers. It's newer music. I still find it fairly exciting. I find it kind of riveting and interesting, and I play it pretty much with the same approach as I do to classical music. It's just stylistically, I'm not playing in a classical or a Baroque style. I'm just playing in a more like a contemporary style.
Now, do you have any experience with video games prior to the whole Distant Worlds and video game music concerts?
I actually have a video, I don't know if I should mention what kind, but a video game set that I played several years ago. Still have it. It's one of the older ones. And so, yeah, I've played some video games myself. I haven't played any in quite a few years, though.
How about the crowd reaction? Is that, do you, from a normal day, night at the Symphony, the crowd reaction, is it sort of standard? Is it kind of the same? Or with the crowd that we have today, is it a totally different reaction than you typically see?
Well, for this kind of concert, you have a very passionate crowd. These people are really into this music. And for regular symphony performance, people are probably a little more reserved. And this is a pretty wild crowd, though. It's younger people, and they're really very passionate about the games and the music, I think.
And finally, did you ever think that after all these years of being a musician, being part of the Houston Symphony, that you would spend some nights out of the year playing video game music? Was that ever a thought that may have came in, when you first started in the Symphony?
I wouldn't have thought that several years ago, but we do a good Pops series, a variety of different artists and Pops music on a regular basis with Houston Symphony, and so I'm not surprised that we're doing it. There's a crowd, there's a market for it, and I think was a good crowd. I think it was a pretty good house, and so I don't mind it. I like the music, frankly. I think it's pretty exciting. So I'm not surprised now. I would have been surprised when I first started, though. When I was in music school, for example, I wouldn't have thought that this is what I'd be doing. So.
All right, Mr. Malone. Well, thank you very much, and it was a great performance today.
My guest here would like to know, how is conducting video game and cinematic pieces different from conducting traditional classical music?
Actually, they're probably more similar than most people think, but obviously there's one issue is synchronization, so it's an obvious issue. We write as a function of accompanying visual images or action that's going on, whether it's for movies or games. So one part of the process is scoring to picture, certainly. But I think the best compositions for movies or for video games are things that rise above just simply underscoring action. Things that have melody, I call them sometimes leitmotifs, where characters, different themes develop as the action is going on. So you really are telling the story musically, not just simply scoring the action or catching various hits or action points. I would compare it in movies, if you compare the music of John Williams to, in Star Wars, for instance, to the music of Howard Shore in Lord of the Rings. How many of us come out of Lord of the Rings singing particular melodies, and how many of us come out of Star Wars singing particular melodies? I think that John Williams took a lot of these things and actually scored battle scenes using the melodic element to actually musically tell the story, not just simply catching the action. And I think the best composers use both of these elements. It's not just the skill of catching action, but it's telling the story musically as well.
Thank you, and I have to take that cue to put in a little plug for our concerts next weekend. The orchestra is going to be performing all of the music from the first Lord of the Rings film, the Fellowship of the Ring. They're going to play the movie full length up on the screen with the dialogue and everything while the orchestra plays the music live. It's going to be pretty outstanding, so I hope you come to that. And Arne, so since you're talking about
so maybe technically difficult. Let's start with that. Well, we heard one tonight, one of the more difficult ones, Dancing Mad, that Tier 4 section of Dancing Mad. You know, the fans here probably know that we were avoiding that Tier 4 section. We can play all the rest of it, but that one section we were letting the rock band play most of the time when we did it, or else we skipped that section because it's very difficult to put together. But eventually I figured out a way to do that with orchestration, that we could do it. We've done it maybe 3 or 4 times now with the full orchestra, but that's a very difficult one to put together, particularly because it's such a large orchestra and forces that we're putting together and keeping them all together. Nobu-san wrote a very difficult sequence of 11/8, 12/16, 7/8 bars. Very tough to put the whole orchestra together in a fast tempo on that. So that's one of the more difficult ones technically.
Well, you did a fantastic job.
Oh.
Okay, Hamauzu-san, who is your favorite character from Final Fantasy?
たくさんいます。一番は決められないんですけど、3つ挙げていいですかね。
He has 3.
まず1人目は、とても素敵な女性である、ライトニング。
ライトニング。
とても素敵な女性で、ライトニングキャラクターが女性なんです。
I'm sorry, I don't know the game. So, very beautiful lady called Lightning.
そして、2つ目は、理想の父親像であるサーチです。
So, the second one is ideal father figure.
サーチ。
Sats.
で、チョコ。
Well, people would like to know from both of you that if you had your own chocobo, what color would it
We had a joke going for a while, the black chocobo, right? I don't know, can he be anything besides yellow? I mean, yellow, right? He can. Hamauzu-san, what color?
He 黄色が好きだから変えたくないですね。
He likes yellow, so he doesn't want to change it.
Okay, Hamauzu-san, how did you come to be the composer for Final Fantasy and other Square Enix games?
どうしてこのファイナルファンタジーの作曲になられましたか？
How did you become involved? How did they find you?
Ever since he was junior high school, he wanted to be composer for this type of video games. So he was trying, and then he started working for the Square Enix. And then he was working there, and luckily, director asked him to join for the composer group. So he was very lucky for that.
And what is your favorite soundtrack that you did not compose? I
he was born in Germany. His parents went to Germany to study music, and he was born in Germany. And when he was a baby, Carl Richter is a famous composer, and it happened. Carl Richter gave him milk when he was a baby, and he didn't know because he was a baby. He didn't know about him, but later he heard the music done by Carl Richter, and one of the music was Bach.
Matthew's question. Mata. Bach. Yeah. Bach.
Bach. Every language. Good there.
Mata.
So we don't know the English name of this, but it's Bach. Yes, that's right.
You knew it. You knew the answer. St. Matthew's Passion.
St. Matthew's Passion. Exactly. That is his favorite ever since he was baby.
Oh, that's wonderful. Good question. Thank you. Okay, we have one more that was written in. I think we have time to take a couple from the audience if anyone has anything, has any more questions for these guys. But Arne, someone would like to know how, since there's so much Final Fantasy music, how do you select which music to play with which orchestra and sort of set the program for your concerts?
It's actually some of the most difficult, one of the most difficult processes that I have to go through. There's a couple of basic factors, just technical factors. How long is the performance length? How many rehearsals do we have? Do we have full chorus? Do we have a full symphony, or are we limited in some way by instrumentation? So all the technical things, that's one set of variables. The other set of variables are, did we play in that location a year, 2 years ago? What repertoire did we play? So we keep all these playlists of everything since Distant Worlds came into existence. The other issue is, as we're adding new repertoire, what are some of the new pieces that have never been heard in this area? So, I mean, we're looking at all these factors all the time. It's really difficult because we all know here how vast the library of music is for Final Fantasy. And, as much repertoire as we have, which can fill up maybe 3 distinct concerts without repeating anything, we have that amount of repertoire already. It's scratching the surface of the amount of music, the sheer volume of music in Final Fantasy. So the decision about what to drop and what to add is always a very difficult one. We don't want to disappoint anyone. On the other hand, there's certain classics we have to play. How can we not play Unwinged Angel? How can we not play Liberi Vitale? On the other hand, I can think of about 6 or 8 pieces I would have loved to play tonight that we didn't get to. We didn't get to Xanarkand, Arid State, things like that. We didn't get to a new one that I just started, which is You're Not Alone. We haven't played that yet on the tour. I think we played it once. We just premiered it. So you see there's so much more, but we wanted to do Dancing Man tonight because we never did that. So it's a difficult decision.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We have about a couple of minutes remaining. Does anyone in the audience have any questions? And I'll need you to speak up, and I will put it into the microphone here. Wow, I feel like power here. This guy's standing and waving, but you're really gonna have to, dig in.
Are you coming back for a third year?
Yeah. Yes, now we're going to go back row, now we're going to go front row.
Yes. Well, actually, because I was involved with your friends and a couple of other tours with Square Enix and Final Fantasy, we did get Final Fantasy VII. We have it in our office. I've tried it, but here's the issue. The issue is that if I'm learning all this music, it would take take so many hours for me to get to all the music. I mean, just to get to a point where I can hear all the themes and see how they're used. So what I have found always is that it's much more efficient use, not only efficient use of my time, but I can learn things more quickly about it when I'm dealing directly with the composers. So with Hamauzu-san for all the Final Fantasy 13 material, with Hamauzu for all, the vast majority of the Final Fantasy things, I communicate directly with them. And with other composers, Koji Kondo, Marty O'Donnell, Jason Hayes, Jeremy Soule, all of them for their various scores. It's very useful to talk to the composers directly and see some of their initial tracks, see how it developed over time, see how it's used, and I generally get some video as well, so I can compare what's going on in the game at that point. So, to play the game, to get to all the music, it's a lifetime, right?
Thanks. How about someone from over here, gentleman in the blue shirt?
Masashi, Hamauzu. Are you composing for 13-2?
Do you hear that? Are you composing for 13-2 for Hamauzu-san?
全部じゃないですけれども、一部を担当することになって、実はヒューストンに来る、ヒューストンに行きの飛行機に乗る直前まで、書いてきました。それで、本当にフラフラの状態で来たんですけど、すごい今日いいコンサートができたので、すっかりその忙しいこと忘れてました。
Yeah, he's composing not all of them, but part of them. And actually, he was composing just before he boarded on the airplane coming to Houston. And he was very tired, and his head was spinning. But today, he attended this very wonderful concert, and he forgot about the music he was writing about. Answer is yes.
Okay, we'll take two more questions. Are you guys a team back here? Okay. Questions for Hamauzu-san? Okay, the question is, what kind of images do you see in your mind while you compose?
そうですね、さっきも言いましたけど、基本的にはその、ゲームの映像だとか、キャラクターの、絵ですね、そういったものを見て、こういうのにはこういう音楽があるなと、考えながら作りますが、そういうのでない場合は、そうですね、鍵盤に向かって、締め切りに間に合わせなきゃならないってこう自分にプレッシャーをかけてですね、力を振り絞ると、いい曲ができることが時々あります。
Most of the time, he sees a picture of the game or the character, so his image will come from that picture most of the time. But sometimes, if he doesn't have that picture, so image provided, many times he was just looking down on the keyboard, and the deadline is, coming, pushing him, and then this pressure will make him to make good music. It happens very often.
Thank you. One more question, yes, right here, Miss. Young lady would like to know, for both Maestro Roth and Hamauzu-san, if when they began their careers, did they ever think they'd be here in this big concert hall with an orchestra, inspiring people with Final Fantasy music?
Easy answer. Can't anticipate this kind of thing. if you had asked me as recently as 6 years ago or 8 years ago, for instance, you know, are you going to be heavily involved in a world tour of music of Final Fantasy? And I would ask exactly, what are you speaking of? You know, so, 8 years ago or 10 years ago. So I mean, it's one never knows where the road takes you, you know, that kind of thing. But what's your answer on this?
ですね、僕がそのゲーム音楽の仕事を志した時はまだ、コンピューターの音だけ、ピコピコなるような音だけの世界だったので、そうですね、そういう感じの曲を作ろうと思ってたんですね。ところが僕が、その業界に入ってからはCD と同じようなクオリティのものがゲームが流れる時代になってきて、まさかオーケストラを作らなきゃいけないとは全く思ってなかったので、相当慌てて、勉強しましたけど、まだこれついてるかちょっとわからないです。
When he started thinking of making music for video game, at that time most of the sound was like a computer sound, it's like a PPP type of sound. So he was thinking making that type of, using that type of sound to make music. But when while he was working, this video games music quality improved. It almost as good as regular CD music. And he never thought he's going to use orchestra for the video game. So he had to study quickly to learn how to compose with the orchestra. And he's working hard right now to learn more.
Okay, thank you everybody. That about wraps it up. I wanted to thank all of you for coming down here to support our orchestra. We feel very fortunate to have such a world-class group of musicians right here in our hometown. The orchestra is supported by our community and by all of you coming down tonight. It helps us continue to provide great music to the Houston community. So thank you all for participating. And great thanks to Arne, Roth, and to Hamauzu-san for bringing this concert here for us tonight. We were so thrilled to have you back, and we really enjoyed working with you. So thank you to Kaiko and the team. Thank you very much.